Hello and welcome to Astro Hi-Fi. This is Gabby Turner, and in this video I'm going to be doing a sort of retrospective reflecting upon Pluto's time spent in the sign of Capricorn, since Pluto is about to tip over into Aquarius, which we'll get a taste of here in 2023. As you can see, I've highlighted in blue. It's going to tip in on March 23rd. 2023, and then it'll stay there until mid-June, and then it'll backtrack into Capricorn, and then come back into Aquarius in 2024. But instead of, hypothetically projecting what could happen with Pluto in Aquarius, I think we can all make some big guesses about that it will have to do with sort of the empowering of technology will be a big part of it. But there was something that, recently has been in the news, of course, these bank failings, which made me kind of want to think backwards about the time from 2008 until, starting to transition out of Capricorn this year. But this is the length of time that Pluto has been in Capricorn. It's been there a long time. And when Pluto was entering Capricorn, we had a banking crisis, and now that Pluto's about to leave Capricorn, there's this new banking crisis. And I think it's interesting because that initial banking crisis, so it's like, what did we learn? Was anything learned along the way? Because Pluto likes to make thorough change, and so it just begs the question of what was changed thoroughly during this time period. I think that there are things that have changed, mostly public consciousness, or like the mass consciousness about power and wealth. I think that has changed a lot during this transit. People have become much more aware of how power and hierarchies of wealth are interconnected. But yeah, in 2008, you can see here, Washington Mutual Bank was the largest one, I guess, that went under that year. But you can see all of these bank failings that started with Pluto's entrance into Capricorn, and they kind of tapered off in the coming years. And now we see a rising tide of bank failures now in 2023, just shortly before Pluto is set to exit Capricorn. So I do feel like this is almost like, Pluto is trying to get our attention here about these issues related with how group resources, which is what banks are, and that's what Pluto is about. Pluto is about consolidated resources of a whole bunch of people, because when you consolidate resources like that, you create more power or more fuel. There's more that could potentially be done with that. And Pluto has to do with power and fuel, and also combining resources through things like banking and investments and things like that. So yeah, and Capricorn has to do with structures and hierarchies. It has to do with, who's making decisions, who's making regulations. So Capricorn relates to the government as well. One of the questions, of course, that has come up at both places, when Pluto was entering Capricorn in 2008 and now when it's exiting in 2023, is that question of, what's the best way to regulate banks? It feels like that's a pressing issue for us, because we seem to have a lot of crises in our country, financial crises that we experience, that relate to that question. And that seems to be something that reoccurs. But anyway, these are my thoughts, some notes that I made about Pluto in Capricorn, just to be thinking about. And now I'm making this video so I can sort of think about it online and share my thoughts with you. Think about it out loud and online and share my thoughts with you. So thinking about like what else happened with Pluto and Capricorn, what sorts of thorough change happened or not? What sorts of transformations um, did we undergo? So thinking first about some keywords for Pluto here. Empowerment and disempowerment, because Pluto goes to extremes, so it likes to explore the extremes of both ends of things. So who's empowered, but also like we want to understand disempowerment as well and what that experience is all about. Pluto creates mass wealth by utilizing mass debt, because debt is a form of death almost. It's a form of absence or something being gone, and Pluto has to do with things that are taken away. It regenerates by laying waste. It's a sort of fertilization that Pluto represents. Creates loss and pain in order to give birth. So, I mean, Pluto has to do with death and rebirth. Every birth, of course, is a death in a way, right? So that those experiences are tied together. Pluto heals by utilizing tremendous pain. So Pluto kind of usually asks us to face the pain in some way. Secrecy and the power therein is also a theme of Pluto, and that's one that I've really seen come about a lot during this time period from 2008 to 2023 is really questions of secrecy and power, especially as it relate to hierarchies. So I don't know about you, but before 2008, I never heard people talking about the Illuminati and things like that, or even the expressions like the elite, references that, or an elite cabal. These are the types of phrases that I think have kind of come into the, our shared usage, more popular usage during the time that Pluto has been in Capricorn. So sort of unearthing what secrets are there, and there have been secrets. There have been secrets that have been unearthed, like with Jeffrey Epstein, for example, and then there are things that are still lingering. It's like there's obviously way more to the story, for example, of Epstein and how many powerful people he was connected with. So these are very Pluto and Capricorn themes. And I've also written a theme of Pluto is to overthrow or be overthrown. Also, Pluto relates to the oil industry and any sort of underground sources of wealth. And that is literal as well as figurative, underground sources of wealth. All right. And here's a slide from the slide that I did from the USA Pluto return video, but I thought it could help here as well, of course. So we have, some other keywords for Pluto. You can read all of those. Trauma here, psychological healing, shadow work, occult, power dynamics, sexuality, excavation, regeneration, massive wealth. And then the ones I've written down here for Capricorn are limitations. So these energies, of course, are going to be combined. When Pluto is transiting through the sign of Capricorn, it has to operate in Capricorn ways. So limitations, responsibility, the establishment, government, karma, hardship, obstacles, legacies, built to last, restrictions, the elderly, depression, hierarchies, status, penny pinching, sustainability, saving, and hoarding. So yeah, how do we, I guess Pluto is bringing up a lot of kind of deep issues, unearthing a lot of our deep issues regarding our ability to save, to put away, to create legacies. Can we sustain? Do we have the power to be self-sustaining? I would say that's also an issue, and I think that has been a strong theme during this time period. People really wanting to be self-sustaining and seeing the ability to be self-sustaining, which is a Capricorn theme, as in and of itself a source of power. So if I don't need to rely on other people, for people who don't want to rely on the government, even, for example, they can tap into this Pluto and Capricorn power and learn how to govern themselves. But also we can see people wanting to use their own power against the government, or the government wanting to use its power over people in order to maintain certain hierarchies. So those are some other themes. All right, so Plutonic themes. Let's go to the notes here. So there was the 1%, which is messaging that came out in 2008 when people started protesting after the bank bailouts. So the idea of the degree to which, I think the idea of it being 1%, again, Pluto likes to create intensity or highlight areas of intensity and extremes. If 1% of people, which is a very small percentage, own the majority of the wealth, wow, it's clear to see who has the power here and who doesn't, in a way. But then at the other end of it, Pluto wants us to ask ourselves, is wealth the only source of power? Anything that can be concentrated can be a source of power. Also, a Plutonic theme would be, if you know, you know. Hierarchies of who has access to secretive information or not. So classification, databases, how information is stored and accessed. So things like the Edward Snowden thing, that type of thing, or WikiLeaks, those sorts of things have been strong themes during this transit. And then I just gave some other examples here of leaks, like the Epstein, stuff related to Epstein that has been leaked, Twitter files, UFO secretly held government info, etc. And also status is associated with more powerful access and more powerful abilities to make usage of the accessible information. All right, so those are the hierarchies. If you have access to the information, then that creates a greater strength for yourself. If you are the military, U.S. military, and you can look into anyone's life anytime you want, then that gives you a lot of power. All right, if you have, you have. So hierarchies of who has access to loans and who does not, whose resources or interests can be leveraged for greater financial power or not, the motivations of underlying important systematic decisions, etc. So Pluto brings to surface this struggle of the people who have, of course, want to maintain what they have or even expand upon what they have. And they have the resources available to leverage for that. That doesn't mean that people who don't have the same resources lack power, but they're going to have to access that power uniquely. They're going to have to dig deep within themselves, which in and of itself is a Plutonic issue. The ability to dig deep within oneself and overcome great struggles. Which takes us to the next theme. Greater risk equals greater reward, especially if you have the power to protect yourself or if the powers that be choose to safeguard you against the losses that may come of your risky investments. So in 2008, the government bailed out banks. In 2023, they are bailing out depositors, which, as I understand it, are a lot of them big businesses themselves, a lot of big tech businesses, which also ties into the themes of Pluto entering Aquarius this year. More on that later in the video. Tech is risky right now, and yet people will want to invest in it largely because it is risky. And we see that over and over again. The bubbles and the busts usually have to do with lots of people jumping on to a risky investment that, at least in the moment, seems to be paying out really well. But it's risky, so that bubble has to burst at some point. Who has the power to invest and who doesn't? How wealth influences government, how government influences wealth. So I think for a lot of things, maybe certain things haven't changed that much per se in terms of how systems operate, but I think, again, there's a greater level of awareness that people have, which in and of itself is a helpful tool for knowing how best to address these issues, I suppose. The pandemic death also, to me, really tied into this transit. And death, like we said before, with Pluto is fertilization. But what would the pandemic be fertilizing? There was a lot of death, but what in the world would be coming of it? Pluto was killing Capricornian things in order to rebirth Capricornian things. What Capricornian things were killed in the pandemic? Old people, that's a Capricornian thing. Government oversight was killed. Savings, old business practices, because people had to navigate very quickly, everyone being home. And it just changed the way so many businesses operated. So practices that didn't fit this model had to adapt, and etc. What Capricornian things were fertilized? Ironically, government oversight was fertilized. Was anything else? I don't know. You let me know. But these are some questions I was asking. Ideally, Pluto's transit in Capricorn would prepare us to face the future with the longevity and structural soundness for which Capricorn is known. That would be ideally what we would hope to get out of this. But no transit is going to be perfect. I mean, Pluto is thorough, but it can't change the world all on its own, All right. So something else that has happened during this transit: occult and other secret hierarchies become less hidden because Pluto brings to the surface what has been underground or hidden, but Pluto also hides things. Pluto is inherently tied into the power of secrecy, and in Capricorn it is the power of secrecy when combined with long-held hierarchies and establishment, such as the monarchy, governments generally, bureaucracy, not just in government, but even in religion, occult bureaucracy and hierarchies, for example, media hierarchies, etc. So how does power control establishment, and how does establishment control access to power? So anyway, some of the questions I'm asking here. Also, bureaucracy and government as it relates to oil, petroleum, and other underground sources of wealth. And I want to point out the both literal and figurative aspect of this, because we've had a lot of issues of people using, for example, this has been ongoing throughout this transit, really, but I think it's coming more into the public awareness now of the degree to which to certain public officials in the United States have been using their government position to leverage for their own personal selfish interests, such as engaging in insider trading. And we could go on and give other examples, but yeah, so I think Pluto at least has brought that more up to the surface. And I think that's good, because corruption is a real issue, and it's good. You can't deal with something unless unless it's brought to the surface. All right. The power of the Fed in the U.S., the power of oligarchs, the increased power that comes with establishing frameworks of how you are allowed to use that power, such as influence over the regulation of how you empower your wealth, which brings to mind one of the great questions of Pluto and Capricorn: who regulates the regulators? What to do when the people in charge take advantage of their regulatory power for selfish interests? Is there an absolute power holder? If so, who is it? Through this transit, the government has not learned to regulate capitalists or regulators. And I'll just say here, not that it matters, but I'm not an anti-capitalist myself, but obviously things have to be regulated. The government has instead mastered how to operate in the same manner and with the same purposes as the capitalists. So, with largely self-interest in mind. Not that is not the goal of all capitalists, Some people have priorities that top, simply creating self-interested wealth, but you've seen that mindset, the more insidious capitalist mindset, you've seen that leak into how government itself operates and the leeways that people take with their power and position within government. All right, and finally, the stability of structures to endure major endings or not is indicative of their overall level of power and endurance. So an example of this would be the monarchy enduring the loss of Queen Elizabeth, the annexation of Crimea, Maidan, the war in Ukraine, Syria, etc. Structures of power seeking to maintain permanence despite devastation. So that struggle seems to be a theme that I've picked up on. But I also want to talk about, when we had the last Saturn conjunct Neptune, and we're going to be having another one in 2026. But the last one happened during the savings and loan crisis. So this was, we talked about the, in 2008, there was the banking crisis that had to do with banks making loans to people who couldn't really afford them and then reselling that debt. The housing crisis. But back in 1989, there was the savings and loan crisis that coincided with the Saturn-Neptune conjunction of 1989. And some people have noted the similarities of the current banking crisis with what happened with the savings and loan crisis of the late 80s and early 90s. So we seem to be having two transits here at once. Pluto through Capricorn, wrapping up what it's been doing there, which seems indicative of banking crises, but also the Saturn-Neptune conjunction. Nothing is in a vacuum, so we can see how the Saturn-Neptune conjunction of 2026 could also be contributing to the banking crisis thematically as we build up to it. And, Saturn is already in the sign of Pisces, which is a sign ruled by Neptune. It just entered Pisces here recently in 2023. And so it's already kind of got that energy going on, building up to the 2026 conjunction. So, we could definitely see this banking crisis being a little bit more extended maybe because of this series of transits happening together. I guess there's only one way to find out. That's to live into the future until the future is the present, and then we'll know. But Neptune has to do with dissolution, and then Saturn has to do with banks, established wealth, and regulation. The absence of banking regulation seems to have a strong correlation with increased riskiness in markets that will lead to great gains, but also very big domino effect losses. So that seems to be a pattern here. Maybe that also relates to this planetary cycle of Saturn and Neptune. The savings and loan crisis led to a strengthening of regulations, which is Saturn's way of trying to contain Neptune. The fact that we can only guess what will happen without risky investments and can fall prey to deceptions in the markets that were never meant to benefit us anyway. I don't know what I was trying to get at there. But anyway, Saturn tries to pin things down and makes them concrete. But Neptune, I think what I was trying to say is Neptune has to do with that effect of risk. Like when we're taking a gamble, we never really know what's going to happen. Neptune can kind of plant this sort of glamorizing optimism in our head where we think things are going to turn out great for us, even if we're taking perhaps a stupid gamble or a series of stupid gambles. So anyway, it's difficult for these two planets to kind of work together because they have very different energies. Saturn wants to be responsible and attached to reality. Neptune doesn't want to be attached to reality. But in any case, Saturn will try to rein in that sort of riskiness and lack of good judgment that Neptune can lead to. All right. The ephemeral nature of Neptune, of supposedly secure investing, Saturn, is how the theme of the current Silicon Valley initiated crisis is starting off. Right. So yeah, this was supposed to be secure investing. This bank had been investing in government bonds or something. Yeah, traditionally very conservative assets. So it just goes to show you that you can never know for sure. Neptune is this sort of hall of mirrors. A traditionally conservative investment like bonds, you wouldn't think that would be risky. And here it ended up being risky because of how the Fed was playing around with interest rates. That's what I was trying to say here. So anyway, I guess we'll have to wait and see what's going to happen. Meanwhile, Pluto will enter Aquarius in 2023 and intensify the issue of shared wealth, i.e. banking, and the internet tech sector, such as tech-driven banking methods as well as investments into tech, and that transit will last until 2043. So if you want to read through these, up here in red are some key themes. Again, for Pluto, we've gone over that a lot in this video. Also key themes up here in blue for Aquarius, and then this ombre purple at the bottom is my sort of brainstorming to combine these two, to think about some of the things that we could experience when Pluto transits Aquarius from 2023 until 2043. These could be some themes. Power plays over tech or internet. I imagine lots of tech companies will be trying to outpower each other, for one thing. War as it relates to technology, cyber attacks, crypto, other sorts of financial innovations. Big tech will become super powered. Also powerful AI, the technology that they've created, will become powerful during this time period. I think that we could expect forensic science technology, and maybe we could just say DNA technology in general, because Pluto has to do with blood and DNA and things like that. And of course, Aquarius has to do with science, technology, and innovations. So I think there will be important, greater understanding of DNA. Transhumanism, because Pluto has to do with transformations, Aquarius with technology. So lots of tech stuff, right? Economic power. My cat wants to join in the video now. People gaining economic power via futurism. Futurism being maybe a driver of economic power. Death machines, who knows what that means, but I thought it was pertinent to write it. Secrecy online, online spying and stalking, cyber trauma. I think The cyber trauma makes me think it could be a lot of different ways that the cyber world becomes more traumatic, but I think as people kind of enter into more of the virtual reality stuff online, I think there have actually already been instances of people experiencing trauma from that. But anyway, the internet has been pretty traumatizing already, so. But also people will become more empowered via the internet. We've already kind of seen the capabilities of that, of people sort of banding together and even uniting over around things like trauma and like, being a support group for each other. So I think that will become something that's stronger during this transit in some way. Empowered rebellion could be something that we see. Alien life forms, power in space. That can mean a lot of things technologically. Unstable economies. I'm not sure. Honestly, I'm not sure why I wrote that. That might be a mistake. Because Aquarius is a sort of unstable energy sometimes. Yeah, so that could make sense. Challenging powerful movements, secret technology. I really feel this one a lot. I think there will be a lot of technology that is developed in secret because of how powerful it could be. And issues related to secret technologies and secret developments of technologies could become a theme as well. Finding out that certain research has been done in secrecy and the implications of that. Also forbidden technology. So to go along with what I was already saying. But yeah, those are some of the kind of themes that I would expect to see in Pluto Aquarius, but we never know until we live it. I remember when we were first entering Pluto and Capricorn back in 2008, I read some astrologer who predicted that there would be some sort of important changes to the geriatric population. And what it ended up being is that, because of the pandemic, that was a population that was hit the hardest. But yeah. So that is something that happened in a way during that transit. But like I said, we will not know until we know. And especially with Aquarius, because Aquarius can be so unexpected. And technology can develop so quickly that, whatever's happening in the world in 2043 is beyond maybe what we could even understand. So, some of it will even be beyond perhaps what we could understand as possible or even logically predict to exist. All right. So that's what I've got for this video. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you later. Bye-bye.